It is time to say good afternoon to David Heurtel, former Quebec Liberal cabinet minister and now political analyst. So, David, I need to start with Paul St-Pierre Plamondon because apparently he's uncovered a massive spy ring that originates in Ottawa in the Liberal Party. And he now says, of course, that he's found something out, but he was not able to provide necessarily specific details. So we asked, I think you want to hear the clip. I'm assuming, given if you're going to accuse the federal government of spying on your party, you have some kind of details, to which he said,
I don't have the means to verify any of those facts as of today.
Oh, I see.
Oh.
So no means to verify what he called those facts as of today. David, what's going on here?
Well, what's going on is that for Paul St-Pierre Plamondon and the Parti Québécois, it's not necessary to have actual facts because in his reasoning, and if you want even more on this all stems from a long interview that he did with Paul Arcand in French on Paul Arcand's podcast, which was released today, this morning. And that in that podcast, he goes even deeper. And his reasoning is that because in the past, say in the last 50 years, it did happen, and we now know, yes, because last week we discussed it when Claude Morin died. Claude Morin, who was a PQ cabinet minister, it was revealed later on that he was an informant for the RCMP. And he says, well, if it happened before, for him, it's the fact that it's probably happening again.
Wow.
Therefore, we're not going to take any risks, and we're going to put our cell phones in special pouches, and I'm going to hire a security consultant. But he goes much further in the Arcand interview. He literally says, and I'm not making this stuff up, he says, look, the federal government, they're colonizers, they're thieves, they're liars. And he went on and on about Jean Chrétien, who lied during the 95 campaign, saying he would have accepted this 50+1 result.
We're still doing that?
We're still doing that because it scores. It is part of that right-wing discourse, populist right-wing discourse that is working in the UK with Nigel Farage, which is working in France, with Jordan Bardella, which is working in the U.S. Regardless of what we may think, Donald Trump, even if he's dropping the polls, he still has a large base of support. He's been elected twice to the presidency. And so it's part of that playbook, of course, adapted to our universe, our little universe in Quebec. But that's what he's doing. If I can only add, just to tell you, just to add to this for a second, during that interview, Arcand covered a wide range of topics in terms of policy and talks about healthcare. So in terms of what he had to answer about healthcare, listen to this. For him, he talked a bit about Santé Québec and a bloated bureaucracy, et cetera, and then he went right away to, with 200,000 asylum seekers, that's a big problem for the healthcare system. That's where he goes to. He goes to immigration, and so he's creating these nemesis. So immigration, the federal government being this huge bad guy, and that's his playbook, and that's what he's working on towards the election.
I guess on the one hand, you say we shouldn't be surprised, but on the other hand, maybe, you think we could get over this by now? He's still referring back to the 1995 referendum. That's 30 some odd years ago.
Well, he's going back to, look, remember the whole controversy over the Plains of Abraham speech with Mark Carney. This is a few months ago. This is not 5, 10, 15 years ago. This is what he does to keep his base activated. This is how he's raising money. This is how he's getting. Remember, he has the type of language that he is believing there's some sort of a conspiracy. He's the one that said, along with François Blanchette, if you're a Federalist, if you're a Quebecer and a Federalist, you're not a Quebecer. You're a Canadian. So Aaron, you and I are not Quebecers,
Yeah.
according to St-Pierre Plamondon. This is a very intricate, thought-out game plan in terms of messaging that has worked for him and has him in the lead in the polls because of the division of the vote.
You know, I do have to wonder, so you talk about this is their sort of, I don't want to call it a ploy, but this is kind of their playbook, and it has been obviously for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. What do you make, and because I'm going to bring this back as a question in a couple of minutes, what do you make of this Quebec Solidaire out of nowhere? Did we talk about Solzanetti yesterday? And this idea,
we did a bit.
Did we? Okay.
Yeah.
Because today,
well,
I'm trying
to... Albert, we talked about François Albert,
right.
Yeah.
So this whole idea of tax the rich, not just as a way to, go ahead and fix all of Quebec's economic woes, as if somehow that would, but this part about saving the planet. So you're right. I know we mentioned this yesterday. I'm just curious. You told me what you think. I'm just today, a day later, I'm like, I can't believe a political party, despite the fact they're running dead last and they're not going to form a government. Is that what's going on? You throw as much stuff against the wall as you can and hope whatever sticks? It can't be any worse for you?
I think it's a bit more to that, but can I just add one more thought on St-Pierre Plamondon, talking about the ploy, the whole aspect of that. I just want to remind you, and there are many examples of this, but in 2023, on a Saturday, I think it was in May of 2023, there was a full front page of the Journal de Montréal, where the Fleur d'Elysée was caught in a bear trap, and the maple leaf was above it, and there was the cover story, and there was a detailed investigative report in the Journal saying that the whole immigration situation was a thought-out plan by the federal government to assimilate and drown out Francophones in Quebec. This is an entire ideology since the 1995 referendum. Since Jacques Parizeau said it was money and immigrants,
right,
and ethnics, he said, it's all part of that. They're since '95, the Lovin and Jean Chrétien, everything that came out after. It's all part of it. So it's not a ploy. It's really the philosophy is that the country was stolen from us. We were going to get it back. We're mad, and we're not going to take it anymore. And we're going to say what needs to be said to convince Quebecers that the enemy is the federal government. And if you don't believe that, you are not a real Quebecer. Right. Anyways, I'm going to get to your question.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's fair.
About Quebec Solidaire. Quebec Solidaire has now, with this, and I agree with you, there's nothing that came out from their meeting over the weekend that's going to help their support. What you're seeing right now, you're seeing it with the NDP, you're seeing with these I would say left or radical left parties. They are, instead of going towards the middle, they're rejecting because they've tried it, right? The NDP tried it with Jack Layton and Tom Mulcair. They came close, and then they rejected. Where they go, they're going further left. Same thing. They tried it with Québec Solidaire with Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois. They had, for a while, they had some momentum.
Yeah.
We keep forgetting.
Until that, right?
Yeah, because in 2022, coming out of the provincial election in 2022, we can take out some stories. Who was the real leader of the official opposition in Quebec City? It was Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois. He was the one scoring points in 2022, 2023. And then things started changing. But the idea here is that the left has decided and to go further to the left, to radicalize, and to go back to being ideologues, because if you don't believe, you're out, you're an enemy. If you don't believe in 100% in the teachings, you are gone. And that's what happened to Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois, or anyone. Trying Vincent Marissal, for example, who said, well, maybe we should talk about this. Maybe we could find some common ground. Maybe we should compromise. No, you're gone. You don't believe, you're gone. And so it's not about gaining votes anymore. They're back to the fundamental, they're activists, they're ideologues, they're not a political party anymore.
Okay, last thing I want to get to really, really quick because I'm going to run late here. Quebec Premier Christine Frechette, I think a lot of people thought whatever wind behind her, in her sails she had before she introduced, this idea of let's renew the notwithstanding clause preemptively. And that kind of people wonder, what are you doing? That's the wrong thing to do. What is she trying to regain some favor now, David, by going back to Paris yet again for a second visit?
Well, going to Paris is part of her game plan. You don't organize these things on a whim. I mean, obviously, this has been in the works for a while. This is part of her game plan. Remember the successful trip to Washington, D.C., meeting with a trade rep. When you're Premier of Quebec, there always, all the premiers do it. You go to Paris, there is certain mystique in there, and it's also about the goal there. I mean, it's not like she's going to talk a lot about trade, but what she is going to talk about is culture and the francophone culture, the French culture. And so that's going to be the big, I think, the big objective of this trip is to shore up her nationalist credentials and symbolically talk about, how we can work together with France in protecting the French culture in these very uncertain digital times.
All right. Well, again, you don't know what comes of that, but you're kind of making the point that it's one of those things you kind of have to do.
Kinda, if you want. No, but her game plan is, I think, it's part also about adding to her credibility as a premier. Okay. And there's a lot of symbolism. There's a lot in her game plan that is about symbolism. The problem with this one is that identity issues and going to Paris, where politically it's even bigger a mess than it is here, it's not necessarily connecting even with the priorities of Quebecers. Identity issues, as you know, are not top of the polling. They're rather, they're not even top 5 in terms of the most important issues of Quebecers. So a lot of people are going to say, with 4 weeks left with the National Assembly, and then we're already in pre-election mode, what are you doing going to Paris? But, you kind of have to do it. You're going to score some points on culture and hopefully, maybe bring back some disaffected nationalist voters that have abandoned the CAQ.
We'll leave it at that. David, thank you. We'll chat again tomorrow.
I'm Luke Wilson. Join me each week for Film Never Lies. Since retiring from the NFL, I've had a lot on my mind, and now I've got my own show. So if you're tired of lazy takes, if you want honest conversations, join us each week. Film Never Lies, available on all TSN platforms and the iHeartRadio app.